The rain fell in heavy, relentless sheets, turning the Chicago streets into rivers of reflected neon. I pulled my thin jacket tighter around my shoulders, the fabric already soaked through. My waitressing uniform clung uncomfortably to my skin beneath it, still smelling of fryer oil and desperation. 3 consecutive shifts had left my feet throbbing in my worn-out sneakers, each step a reminder of how far I still had to go before reaching my cramped studio apartment. "Just one more block, Eliza," I whispered to myself, the words disappearing into the storm. My life had become a series of just one mores. Just one more shift to make rent. Just one more month until I could afford a course at the community college. Just one more year until I could move somewhere better. Promises I made to myself that felt increasingly hollow as time passed. The sidewalk ahead was partially blocked by construction, forcing pedestrians to funnel through a narrow passage. I kept my head down, watching puddles form and dissolve under my feet, letting the rhythm of the rain drown out my thoughts. Lost in this hypnotic pattern, I didn't notice when the flow of people suddenly halted. A collective intake of breath rippled through the crowd. Something had changed in the atmosphere. A subtle shift in pressure, as if a storm cell had moved in. I looked up, momentarily confused by the sea of umbrellas now parting around something. Or someone. That's when I saw them. 3 black SUVs had pulled up alongside the sidewalk, their engines purring like predators. The windows were tinted so dark they seemed to absorb the streetlights rather than reflect them. 2 men emerged from the first vehicle, their movements synchronized and deliberate. They wore identical black suits despite the downpour, neither carrying umbrellas, their eyes hidden behind sunglasses even in the night. They scanned the area with mechanical precision before nodding toward the middle SUV. The back door opened, and the rain seemed to hesitate. A polished leather shoe touched the wet pavement first, then came the leg of a suit that I instinctively knew cost more than everything I owned combined. The material didn't simply look expensive. It seemed alive somehow, drinking in the darkness around it. A man emerged, tall and broad-shouldered, his movements fluid yet controlled. Unlike his men, he carried an umbrella, though he didn't immediately open it. Instead, he stood in the rain for a moment, letting it wash over him as if testing its resolve against his own. His face remained in shadow, but I caught the gleam of a heavy watch as he finally raised his arm to open the umbrella with a snap that sounded like a gunshot in the night. The crowd around me had thinned considerably, people suddenly finding urgent reasons to be elsewhere. But my feet remained planted, my body too tired to register the danger my mind was screaming about. This was the kind of man you didn't stare at in this city. The kind whose name was whispered rather than spoken. The kind who owned people, not just things. I should have looked away. Should have shuffled past with my eyes down like everyone else, but exhaustion had stripped away my self-preservation. He was closer now, moving through the narrow passage with his guards clearing a path. The light from a storefront finally illuminated his features, and the air caught in my lungs. His face was all sharp angles and controlled power, high cheekbones, a strong jaw darkened with precisely maintained stubble, and eyes so intensely dark they seemed to pull you in like gravity wells. He wasn't conventionally handsome. He was beautiful in the way dangerous things often are, like admiring the perfection of a predator before it strikes. A shiver ran through me that had nothing to do with my wet clothes. Then his phone rang. He answered it with a small movement, bringing it to his ear without speaking. His expression changed subtly as he listened. A slight narrowing of the eyes, a tightening around the mouth. Something was wrong. The energy around him shifted, becoming charged, electric. He barked a single word in what sounded like Italian, his voice low but carrying power that made my skin prickle. His men immediately tensed, hands moving beneath their jackets. One spoke rapidly into a wrist mic. The crowd, sensing the change, moved faster, more urgently away. But my exhaustion had made me slow, my brain foggy with fatigue. I needed to move. Now. I forced my leaden legs forward, trying to slip past the wall of suits and tension. Just as I drew parallel with him, a businessman rushing in the opposite direction shouldered roughly past me. I stumbled, my tired legs betraying me, and fell forward, directly into the chest of the man with the dark eyes. Time crystallized into a perfect moment of horror. My hands pressed against the immaculate fabric of his suit. My wet hair brushed against the exposed skin of his neck. I felt the solid wall of his chest, unnaturally warm in the cold rain, and caught his scent. Expensive cologne layered over something darker, earthier. Like wood smoke and whiskey, and something metallic I didn't want to identify. His hands gripped my upper arms, steadying me with surprising gentleness. But there was nothing gentle about the sudden stillness of his body, or the way his guards had positioned themselves around us, hands now openly holding weapons. "I'm so sorry," I stammered, trying to push away. But his grip remained firm. "Please. I didn't mean to." The words died in my throat as his eyes locked with mine. Something flickered in those dark depths. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. Though I was certain we'd never met, I would have remembered those eyes. For one suspended moment, we stayed like that, connected by touch and gaze, the rain creating a curtain around us, separating us from the world. Then, slowly, deliberately, his eyes traveled over my face, taking in every detail with an intensity that made me feel simultaneously exposed and seen in a way I hadn't been in years. "Your name." It wasn't a question but a command, spoken softly, yet leaving no room for refusal. "Eliza," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the rain. "Eliza Conti." Something shifted in his expression at my last name, a subtle change I couldn't decipher. His thumb brushed almost imperceptibly against the inside of my arm, sending an involuntary shiver through me. "Italian?" he asked. I nodded. "On my father's side. I never knew him." Why had I volunteered that information? Something about those eyes made me want to tell him everything and nothing at all. He released one of my arms to touch my face, his fingers tracing an invisible line from my temple to my jaw, with barely there pressure. I should have been terrified, should have pulled away and run. Instead, I remained frozen, caught in some spell I couldn't name. "You're soaked through," he observed, his voice rich with an accent I couldn't quite place. Italian layered over something else. His thumb brushed across my lower lip, ostensibly wiping away a raindrop, but the gesture felt intimate in a way that made heat rush to my cheeks despite the cold. And exhausted. Before I could respond, a black car screeched around the corner, moving too fast for the wet roads. One of his men shouted something, and suddenly I was being pushed aside. The moment shattered. The man's expression hardened as he turned toward the approaching vehicle, his body angling slightly, protectively, in front of mine. The car sped past us, splashing dirty water across the sidewalk. False alarm. But the tension in the air remained, thick and suffocating. He turned back to me, his expression now unreadable. He studied me for another long moment before reaching into his jacket. I flinched involuntarily, but he merely produced a business card. Thick, cream-colored stock with nothing but a phone number embossed in black. "If you need anything," he said, placing it in my palm and closing my fingers around it with his own, the heat of his skin burning against my cold flesh. "Anything at all." Then he released me and continued on his way, his guards forming a barrier around him. I stood there, clutching the card, watching his retreating form until he disappeared into one of the waiting SUVs. As they pulled away from the curb, I noticed one vehicle remained behind, its engine idling. Through the tinted window, I could just make out the silhouette of someone watching me. I should have thrown the card away, should have run home and locked my door. Instead, I carefully tucked it into my pocket and continued walking, acutely aware of the SUV that now crawled along the street parallel to my path, maintaining the same pace as my tired steps. By the time I reached my building, my fingers were numb with cold, fumbling with my keys. The ancient lock always stuck, requiring a combination of pressure and jiggling that I usually managed automatically. Tonight my hands trembled too much to find the right angle. "Need help with that?" I whirled around, my heart leaping into my throat. A man stood behind me, one of the suits from earlier, his face expressionless beneath the streetlight. I hadn't heard him approach, hadn't noticed the SUV stopping. "No," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Thank you. I'm fine. Mr. Ricci wanted to make sure you got home safely." He gestured to the door. "May I?" Ricci. The name hit me like a physical blow. Everyone in Chicago knew that name, even if most people pretended not to. Dante Ricci, the man whose influence stretched across the city like a shadow, touching everything from politics to real estate to the waterfront businesses, the man whose family had controlled the city's underbelly for generations. And I had fallen into his arms. Before I could refuse again, the man had taken my keys and opened my door with disturbing ease. He handed them back with a slight nod. "Mr. Ricci will be in touch," he said, then turned and walked back to the idling SUV. I hurried inside, locking the door behind me and leaning against it, my heart pounding. Through my single window, I watched the black vehicle remain parked outside my building for several long minutes before finally pulling away. Only then did I pull out the card, running my fingers over the embossed number. What had he seen when he looked at me? Why had he given me this? And more importantly, what would happen if I used it? I placed the card on my small kitchenette counter and stared at it, feeling as though I'd been handed something both precious and dangerous. Like a key to a door I wasn't sure I wanted to open. That night, I dreamed of dark eyes and rain, of hands that both protected and imprisoned. And somewhere, in a part of the city I'd never seen, I knew those same eyes were open, perhaps looking at my name, learning who I was, deciding what to do about the woman who had literally fallen into his life. I woke to sunlight streaming through my thin curtains and the distant sound of traffic from the street below. For a moment, I lay still, savoring the warmth of my blankets and the rare luxury of waking naturally, rather than to an alarm. Then the events of the previous night came rushing back, and I sat up with a jolt. Had it been real? The rain, the dark eyes, the card? I glanced toward my kitchenette, half expecting to see nothing there. But the cream-colored card remained, catching the morning light, looking even more expensive in the daylight than it had under the street lamps. Dante Ricci. I'd bumped into Dante Ricci, and somehow, impossibly, I'd survived. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, jolting me from my thoughts. It was a message from my manager at the diner. "Don't bother coming in today, or ever again. Position filled." My stomach dropped. 3 consecutive shifts covering for a sick coworker, and this was my reward? No warning, no explanation, just a text ending my already precarious financial situation. I fell back against my pillow, pressing the heels of my hands against my eyes to stop the tears threatening to form. "Perfect," I whispered to the empty room. "Just perfect." With rent due in a week and barely $200 to my name, I couldn't afford even a single day without income. I'd have to hit the streets immediately, dropping applications at every restaurant and shop in walking distance. I forced myself out of bed and into the shower, letting the lukewarm water, the building never had truly hot water, wash away the lingering scent of rain and expensive cologne that seemed to cling to my skin. As I dressed in my one decent pair of jeans and a simple blouse, my eyes kept drifting to that card. No. Whatever that man wanted, it couldn't be good. Men like Ricci didn't help people like me without expecting something in return, something I probably couldn't afford to give. I tucked the card into my drawer under a stack of old t-shirts and headed out. The morning was bright and clear. No trace of last night's storm except for puddles gradually evaporating in the sunshine. I spent hours walking from place to place, filling out applications, smiling until my cheeks hurt, repeating the same practiced lines about being a hard worker, a quick learner, a team player. By afternoon, I'd covered most of my neighborhood with nothing to show for it but aching feet and fading hope. I stopped at a corner cafe to rest, counting out change for the cheapest item on the menu, a plain coffee that I nursed slowly, making it last. From my seat by the window, I watched people pass by, all seemingly with purpose, with direction, with security. When had I last felt secure? Before my mother died, perhaps. Before the medical bills ate through her savings, and then mine. Before I learned just how quickly you could go from getting by to barely surviving. A black SUV pulled up across the street, and my heart stuttered. The same model as last night. I sank lower in my seat, but the vehicle merely idled for a moment before moving on. Still, the knot in my stomach didn't ease. Was I being paranoid, or had that car been following me all day? The thought followed me as I continued my job hunt, making me glance over my shoulder at every corner. By evening, as I trudged back to my apartment building, exhaustion had taken over again, dulling even my fear. I was so focused on putting one foot in front of the other that I didn't notice the sleek black car parked outside my building until I was almost at the entrance. A different man from last night stood beside it, his posture alert despite his relaxed stance. He straightened as I approached. "Miss Conti?" I stopped, my hand automatically reaching for my pepper spray. "Mr. Ricci would like to speak with you." He gestured to the open car door, not an invitation, an instruction. "I'm busy," I said, my voice small despite my attempt at confidence. The man's expression didn't change. "It's about your employment situation." A chill ran through me. How could he know? Had he been watching me all day as I desperately searched for work? "I'm not interested," I said, moving toward the door to my building. The man sighed. "Miss Conti, I'm just the messenger. But I should tell you that Mr. Ricci isn't accustomed to being refused. He's offering you an opportunity, one that many would be grateful for." I hesitated, my hand on the door. What choice did I really have? I could go upstairs to my empty apartment and stare at my phone, waiting for calls that wouldn't come from places that wouldn't hire me, or I could get in the car and at least learn what the devil wanted. "I need to change first," I said. A last attempt at control. The man shook his head. "Mr. Ricci is waiting." Of course he was. Men like him never waited. The world waited for them. With a deep breath, I turned and walked to the car. The interior was cool and dark, the leather seats softer than anything I'd ever touched. As soon as I was seated, the door closed beside me with a soft, expensive thud. The man got into the front passenger seat, and the driver, silent and anonymous behind the partition, pulled smoothly away from the curb. "Where are we going?" I asked. "Not far," was the only reply. The windows were tinted, but not so dark that I couldn't see outside. We headed north, toward the Gold Coast, Chicago's wealthiest neighborhood. The buildings grew progressively more elegant, the streets cleaner, the people better dressed. We finally stopped before a gleaming high-rise overlooking the lake, its glass facade reflecting the sunset in shades of gold and crimson. A valet opened my door, his eyes carefully averted as I stepped out. The man who had collected me led me through a private entrance, past a security desk where no one asked for ID or questioned our presence, and into an elevator that required a keycard to operate. He selected the top floor without speaking. My heart pounded in my chest, each floor we passed taking me further from everything familiar and deeper into a world I didn't understand. The elevator doors opened directly into a foyer of gleaming marble. Ahead, floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a panoramic view of the lake and skyline that momentarily took my breath away. "Wait here," the man said, leaving me standing on what was probably an extremely expensive rug, feeling acutely aware of my worn sneakers and simple clothes. I heard voices, low, male, discussing something in rapid Italian before switching to English. "Sure about this?" one said. "Leave us," came the reply, a voice I recognized instantly. Footsteps approached, and then he was there. Dante Ricci, somehow even more imposing in daylight than he had been in the rain. He wore a charcoal suit, impeccably tailored to his broad shoulders and narrow waist. His dark hair was styled back from his forehead, emphasizing those intense eyes that now studied me with the same unsettling focus as before. "Eliza Conti," he said, my name somehow sounding different in his mouth. "Welcome." "You had me brought here," I said, trying to keep the tremor from my voice. "Why?" His lips curved slightly. Not quite a smile, but an acknowledgement of my directness. "You lost your job this morning," he stated, moving to a sideboard where crystal decanters caught the fading sunlight. "Tea? Coffee? Something stronger?" "How do you know that?" I demanded, ignoring his offer. He poured amber liquid into a glass for himself. "I make it my business to know things." "About waitresses?" This time he did smile, brief but genuine. "About people who interest me." He gestured toward a seating area, and after a moment's hesitation, I followed him, perching on the edge of a leather sofa while he took the chair opposite. The entire situation felt surreal, like I'd stepped into someone else's life. "Why do I interest you?" I asked, unable to keep the suspicion from my voice. He studied me over the rim of his glass. An excellent question. One I've been asking myself since last night. He set down his drink. Tell me about yourself, Eliza Conti. Why should I? Because I'm offering you a job, I blinked. A job doing what? Working here, in this penthouse. I stiffened. I'm not that kind of... As my personal assistant, he interrupted, his expression hardening slightly at my implication. My schedule is complex. I need someone organized, discreet, and intelligent to manage it. He leaned forward. Someone who isn't easily intimidated. And you think that's me? Based on what? Bumping into you in the rain? Based on the fact that when you realized who I was, you still looked me in the eye instead of at the floor. Based on the fact that you're here now, asking questions instead of trembling. His gaze intensified. And yes, perhaps also because of the rain, I shook my head. You don't know anything about me. I know more than you think. He reached for a folder on the coffee table between us and opened it. Eliza Marie Conti, 25 years old, born to Maria Conti, father unknown, or at least unnamed on your birth certificate. Graduated high school with honors but turned down a partial scholarship to Northwestern to care for your mother during her illness. Worked 3 jobs simultaneously to pay her medical bills. After she passed, you maintained a series of service industry positions while taking night classes at the community college. Currently, one missed rent payment away from eviction. My mouth went dry. Every detail was accurate, laid out in his hands like he owned my history just as surely as he owned this building. How dare you? I whispered. I dare many things, Eliza. He closed the folder. Including offering you a way out of your current situation. By working for you? I stopped myself. A what? His voice had gone dangerously soft. Say it. I met his gaze directly. A criminal. He didn't flinch at the word. If anything, he seemed amused by my audacity. I'm a businessman with diverse interests, he said smoothly. What I'm offering you is legitimate employment. Excellent salary. Benefits, housing in this building, in fact. And what would I have to do for all that? Exactly what I said. Manage my schedule. Answer calls. Arrange meetings and travel. He picked up his glass again. Nothing illegal. Nothing immoral. Unless you consider organization a sin. I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it all. Why me? There must be hundreds of qualified assistants in Chicago who would jump at this opportunity, undoubtedly. His eyes never left mine. But they aren't you. The way he said it. Simple, direct, with an undertone I couldn't quite identify. Sent a shiver down my spine. And if I say no, then my driver takes you home and you continue your job search tomorrow. He shrugged. I'm not in the habit of forcing people to work for me, Eliza. That would be counterproductive. But you are in the habit of investigating them and having them followed. A flash of something, approval, crossed his features. As I said, I make it my business to know things. I should have walked out, should have demanded to be taken home. Instead, I found myself asking, what does it pay? He named a figure that made me blink. It was more than triple what I'd been making at the diner. That's the starting salary, he added. With a performance review after 90 days. My mind raced. With that kind of money, I could pay off my mother's remaining medical debt. Could re-enroll in college full-time rather than one class at a time. Could finally stop living on the edge of disaster. But at what cost? I need time to think about it, I said finally. He nodded, as if he'd expected this. Of course. He removed a phone from his jacket pocket and placed it on the table between us. This is yours if you accept. My number is programmed in. You have until tomorrow morning to decide. And if I take the phone but don't call? His lips quirked. Then you have a new phone. I hesitated, then picked it up. It was sleek, expensive. Probably the latest model. This seems like a lot for someone you just met. Perhaps. He stood, indicating our conversation was over. Or perhaps it's very little for something I want. The words hung in the air between us, laden with meaning I wasn't sure I wanted to decipher. As if summoned by thought alone, the man who had brought me appeared at the entrance to the room. Marco will take you home now, Ricci said, stepping closer. Close enough that I could smell that same cologne from last night, could see the tiny scar at the edge of his right eyebrow. Unless you'd like to stay for dinner? It was the first normal thing he'd said, almost human in its simplicity, and it caught me off guard. No, I said quickly. Thank you. I should go. He nodded, then surprised me by taking my hand. His touch was warm, his fingers wrapping around mine with gentle pressure as he turned my palm upward. With his other hand, he placed something cool and metal in my grasp. A key. The phone has my private number, he said, his voice low. The key is to the service entrance on the south side of the building. Either way, I'll be seeing you again, Eliza Conti. It wasn't a threat. It was a certainty, spoken with the confidence of a man who'd rarely, if ever, been denied what he wanted. And as Marco escorted me back to the elevator, I couldn't shake the feeling that what Dante Ricci wanted, inexplicably, was me. That night, I barely slept. I paced my small apartment, the phone and key sitting on my kitchen counter like artifacts from another world. Every time I convinced myself to refuse Ricci's offer, I remembered the stack of unpaid bills in my drawer. Every time I leaned toward accepting, I remembered what he was. By morning, exhaustion had made the decision for me. I needed this job. I could always quit if things became dangerous or compromising. I wasn't agreeing to anything permanent. At least, that's what I told myself as I dialed the only number programmed into the sleek new phone. He answered on the first ring. You've decided. No hello, no question. Just that certainty again. Yes, I said, surprised by the steadiness of my voice. I accept your offer, with conditions. A pause. I'm listening. I won't do anything illegal. I won't lie for you. And I can leave any time if I'm uncomfortable with what I'm asked to do. Reasonable terms, he replied, and I could hear the smile in his voice. Can you begin today? And just like that, my life changed. Within hours, Marco arrived with another suit-wearing associate who efficiently packed my meager belongings while I stood awkwardly to the side. By afternoon, I was installed in an apartment on the 45th floor of Ricci's building. Not the penthouse, but close enough to be summoned quickly. The space was 3 times the size of my old studio, with floor-to-ceiling windows, sleek modern furniture, and a kitchen I was afraid to cook in for fear of marring its pristine surfaces. A woman named Sophia, Ricci's household manager, provided me with a tablet containing schedules, contacts, and protocols I would need to memorize. My work attire, several elegant outfits in exactly my size, hung in the bedroom closet alongside shoes with labels I recognized from magazine ads. Mr. Ricci prefers punctuality and preparedness, Sophia explained, her tone professionally neutral, though her eyes assessed me with unconcealed curiosity. You'll shadow me for the next few days to learn his routines and preferences. How long have you worked for him? I asked. 15 years, she replied, since he took over the family business from his father. I wanted to ask more, about the nature of that business, about what had happened to the previous assistant, about why he'd chosen me, but Sophia's expression made it clear that questions weren't welcome. The next 3 days passed in a blur of activity. I learned that Ricci owned legitimate businesses across the city. Restaurants, nightclubs, real estate holdings, import companies, alongside whatever shadowy operations generated the tension that sometimes filled a room when certain men visited the penthouse. I learned that he rose early, exercised rigorously, and conducted most important business before noon. That he preferred espresso to American coffee, disliked digital calendars but required them anyway, and never took calls during meals. I learned that his men watched him with a mixture of fear and devotion I'd never seen before, that when he entered a room, everyone's attention shifted to him, like planets reorienting to a sun, that despite his brutally efficient schedule, he sometimes stood at the windows overlooking the city, so still and silent that he seemed almost vulnerable. Almost. On the 4th day, Sophia informed me that I would be taking over full assistant duties. He's pleased with your progress, she said, handing me a new security badge that would grant me access to additional areas of the building. Don't disappoint him. The unspoken warning lingered as I rode the elevator to the penthouse for my first solo morning briefing. I'd prepared meticulously, reviewing his schedule, anticipating questions, wearing one of the elegant pantsuits that had been provided for me. Still, my hands trembled slightly as I used my keycard to access the private elevator. When the doors opened, Ricci was waiting, dressed in running clothes, expensive ones, but the most casual I'd seen him. Sweat glistened on his forehead and throat. He'd clearly just finished exercising. "Good morning, Eliza," he said, stepping into the elevator beside me rather than letting me exit. "Walk with me." Confused, I remained in place as he selected the button for the building's garden terrace. "Sir, you have a meeting at 9 with—" "I'm aware of my schedule," he interrupted, though not unkindly. "I've memorized it. Now I want to hear your impressions of the past few days." The elevator descended smoothly, and I tried to gather my thoughts. "Everything has been very efficient." A small smile touched his lips. "A diplomatic observation. What else?" "Your operation is impressive," I admitted, "though I still don't understand why you hired me." The doors opened onto a rooftop garden, an oasis of green 30 floors above the city streets. Ricci gestured for me to follow him along a stone path winding between carefully tended plants and trees. "You know why people fear me, Eliza?" he asked, seemingly changing the subject. I hesitated. "Because of what you can do to them," he shook his head. "Because of what they imagine I might do. Perception is a powerful weapon." He stopped beside a small fountain, the sound of falling water creating a sense of privacy. "What do you perceive when you look at me?" The question caught me off guard. I looked at him. Really looked. Taking in not just the physical details I'd catalogued over the past days, but the essence of him, the controlled power in his movements, the weight of authority he carried, the moments of unexpected consideration I'd glimpsed. "Danger," I said honestly, "but not chaos. You're contained, deliberate." Something flashed in his eyes. Approval, perhaps. "That night in the rain," he said, his voice lower, "when you fell against me, what did you feel?" Heat rushed to my cheeks. "I don't." "You do," he insisted, stepping closer. "Tell me." "Fear," I whispered, "and—" I couldn't finish. "And?" He was close enough now that I could see the varied browns and blacks that made up his seemingly solid dark irises. "Recognition," I admitted. "Like I'd been waiting to bump into you without knowing it." The words hung between us, too honest, too revealing. I looked away, embarrassed by my own admission. His fingers gently turned my face back to his. "That's why I hired you, Eliza Conti. Because you see me clearly. Few people do." Before I could respond, his phone chimed. He checked it, his expression shifting to something harder, more distant. "The Canavan meeting needs to be moved up," he said, his tone all business now. "Call Marco and have the car ready in 20 minutes. I'll need the Westlake proposal files." Just like that, the moment was gone, replaced by the efficient rhythm of the workday. I followed him back to the elevator, making notes on my tablet, slipping into the professional role I was still learning. But something had changed. A line had been crossed, or at least identified, and I wasn't sure where it would lead. The weeks that followed established a pattern. During the day, I was the consummate professional assistant, arranging meetings, fielding calls, anticipating Ricci's needs before he expressed them. I learned the complex web of his business interests, the hierarchy of his organization, the subtle signals that indicated his mood. But there were moments, brief, electric moments, when the professional facade slipped, his hand lingering on mine when I passed him documents, his eyes finding me across crowded rooms. Late nights in his office when everyone else had gone, the conversation drifting from business to more personal matters. I learned that his father had died when he was 26, thrusting him into leadership earlier than expected, that he had an older sister who lived in Italy with her family, protected from the family business, that he spoke 4 languages fluently and played the piano when troubled. In turn, I found myself sharing pieces of my own life. My mother's long illness, my abandoned dreams of becoming an architect, the solitude that had defined my existence since her death. "You've been alone too long," he said one evening, as we shared a rare meal on his terrace, the city lights spreading below us like fallen stars. "It's not good for anyone to be so isolated." Says the man who keeps everyone at arm's length, I replied, emboldened by the late hour and the glass of wine I'd been nursing. Instead of taking offense, he laughed. A genuine sound I'd heard only a handful of times. Perhaps that's why I recognize it in you. I smiled, but a question had been nagging at me for weeks. Why hasn't anyone come looking for your last assistant? I never even heard their name. His expression shuddered. Because there wasn't one. Not for over a year. Why? He considered me for a long moment before answering. The position requires extraordinary trust, and you trust me? I couldn't keep the disbelief from my voice. After only a month? I trusted you the moment you looked into my eyes in the rain, he said simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Some things can't be explained, Eliza. Only recognized. The intensity of his gaze made my heart race. I'd been fighting this attraction, this pull toward him, since that first night, trying to maintain professional boundaries, reminding myself of who he was and what he did. But in moments like this, those reminders seemed to matter less. It's getting late, I said, standing abruptly. You have an early meeting tomorrow. He rose as well, closer than I'd expected, always so concerned with my schedule. It's my job. Is that all this is to you? His voice had dropped to that dangerous softness. A job? I took a step back. It has to be. Why? Because I can't afford for it to be anything else. I met his gaze directly. I know who you are, Dante. What you do. It was the first time I'd used his first name. It felt intimate. Forbidden. Do you? He moved closer, erasing the distance I'd created. Or do you know what people say I do? Is there a difference? An ocean of difference. His hand came up to touch my face, his thumb tracing my cheekbone. Ask me. Anything. I'll tell you the truth. I should have asked about the businesses that operated after dark, about the men with guns who sometimes accompanied him, about the hushed conversations in Italian that stopped when I entered a room. Instead, I asked, why me? Really? His eyes softened, because when you look at me, you see the man, not the monster, because your hands didn't tremble when you touched me, even though they should have, because something in me recognized something in you. His fingers slid into my hair, cradling the back of my head. I knew I should pull away, knew this was crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. But I'd been drawn to this man since the moment we'd collided in the rain, pulled by forces I didn't understand. This is a mistake, I whispered, even as I leaned into his touch. No, he murmured, his lips now inches from mine. This is inevitable. When he kissed me, it was with a gentleness I hadn't expected, as if I were precious, breakable. His restraint was palpable, a man accustomed to taking whatever he wanted, suddenly careful, almost reverent. Then his phone rang, shattering the moment. He pulled back, his expression darkening as he checked the caller ID. I need to take this. I nodded, stepping away, grateful for the interruption that had prevented me from making what my brain insisted was a terrible mistake, even as my body and heart protested otherwise. We'll continue this conversation, he said, his eyes promising things that made my pulse quicken. But we didn't. At least not for several days. A crisis with one of his business interests took him away from Chicago, leaving me to manage his affairs from the penthouse. It was during this time that I began to understand the true nature of Dante Ricci's empire. I overheard conversations about shipments and territories, saw names in his contact list that I recognized from news reports about organized crime, found a locked drawer in his desk that I was expressly forbidden to open. The evidence of who he truly was accumulated, impossible to ignore. Yet alongside it grew my knowledge of the man himself, his loyalty to those who worked for him, his generosity to causes he supported anonymously, his unwavering adherence to a personal code I was still learning to decipher. He returned on the 5th day, earlier than expected. I was in his office, organizing files, when the elevator doors opened. He looked tired, his customary immaculate appearance slightly rumpled from travel. But his eyes, when they found me, brightened. "Welcome back," I said, maintaining professional decorum despite the memory of his lips on mine. He crossed the room in long strides, and took my face in his hands. "No more pretending," he said, his voice rough with emotion. No more walls between us. This time when he kissed me, there was nothing gentle about it. This was passion unleashed, desire finally acknowledged. His arms wrapped around me, pulling me against him as if he could erase the very space that separated us, and I responded with equal fervor, weeks of suppressed feelings breaking free. "Tell me to stop," he murmured against my neck. "Tell me this isn't what you want. I can't." I gasped as his lips traced fire along my skin. "I won't." He lifted me effortlessly, setting me on the edge of his desk, his body pressing between my thighs as his hands tangled in my hair. "Do you have any idea what you do to me? How I've thought of nothing but you?" I couldn't speak, could only pull him closer, surrendering to the chemistry that had been building since that rainy night. His hands were everywhere, claiming, exploring, as if he needed to map every inch of me. Then suddenly he froze, his body tensing. I heard it a moment later, the elevator chime, announcing an arrival. Dante moved with astonishing speed, placing himself in front of me, shielding me from view as the doors opened to reveal Marco and another man I didn't recognize. "Sir," Marco began, then stopped, taking in the scene. "Apologies for the interruption. We have a situation." Dante's posture shifted subtly. "What kind of situation?" "The kind that requires your immediate attention." Marco's eyes flickered to me briefly. "Give us a moment," Dante said, his tone leaving no room for argument. When they'd stepped back into the elevator, he turned to me. His expression had changed, hardened into the mask he wore for business. "I need to handle this," he said, straightening his tie. "Wait for me here." "Dante." I caught his arm. "What's happening?" His eyes softened momentarily. "Nothing for you to worry about," but there was a tension in his jaw that belied his reassuring words. "Don't lie to me," I said quietly. He cupped my face. "Never that. But there are parts of my life you're not ready to see." He kissed me briefly. "Not yet." With that cryptic statement, he left me standing in his office, my lips still burning from his kiss, my mind racing with questions I wasn't sure I wanted answered. Through the windows, I watched as Dante emerged from the building below, flanked by Marco and 3 other men. They climbed into waiting SUVs and sped away. Something was wrong. Very wrong. And whatever it was, it had everything to do with the side of Dante Ricci I'd been trying to ignore. The side that made people cross the street to avoid him, that kept a gun in his desk drawer, that conducted business in whispers and coded language. I moved to the window, pressing my palm against the cool glass as I watched the SUVs disappear into the city traffic. I'd allowed myself to fall for a man I didn't fully know, a man whose world operated by rules I didn't understand. What had I gotten myself into? The question echoed in my mind as night fell over Chicago. And still, Dante didn't return. Dante didn't come back that night. Or the next day. Sophia arrived in the morning, her expression grim. "Mr. Ricci has been called away on urgent business," she informed me, her tone revealing nothing. "You'll continue managing things here in his absence." "When will he return?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. She gave me a measuring look. "When the situation is resolved." "What situation, Sophia?" I pressed. "What's going on?" Her posture stiffened. "That's not your concern," but it was. It had become my concern the moment I'd let Dante Ricci kiss me, the moment I'd kissed him back. I spent the day going through motions, rescheduling appointments, fielding calls, maintaining the appearance of business as usual, but my mind was elsewhere, imagining scenarios, each more troubling than the last. Was he in danger? Was he the danger? By evening, I'd made a decision. If Sophia wouldn't tell me what was happening, I would find out for myself. I waited until the night security team did their rounds before slipping into Dante's private office. I'd never been in there alone after hours, had never dared to look too closely at the files he kept locked away. Now I methodically searched every drawer, every cabinet. Most were locked, but I'd been paying attention these past weeks. The key to his private files was hidden behind a false panel in his desk. A secret I'd glimpsed once when he thought I wasn't watching. Inside the locked drawer, I found documents in Italian, photographs of warehouses by the waterfront, and a small worn leather notebook. I paged through it carefully, my heart racing as I recognized names connected to prominent city officials, amounts that could only be payoffs, and coded references to shipments and territories. The evidence of who, what, Dante really was lay in my hands. Undeniable. Damning. I was replacing everything exactly as I'd found it when my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. North door. Now. Come alone. My hand trembled as I locked the drawer and returned the key to its hiding place. Who had sent the message? Was it a trap? Or was someone offering answers? The north door led to a service corridor connecting the penthouse to a private stairwell, a route I'd only used once, during Sophia's initial tour of the building. I made my way there cautiously, every sense alert for danger. The corridor was dimly lit and silent. I pushed through the heavy door to the stairwell and found Marco waiting, his expression grim. "You shouldn't be here," he said by way of greeting. "Where is he?" I demanded. Marco studied me for a long moment before answering. "Dealing with a problem." "What kind of problem requires disappearing for 2 days? The kind that threatens everything." He took a step closer. "How much has he told you?" I hesitated. "Not enough." A tight smile touched his lips. "At least you're honest." He checked his watch. "He sent me to get you. You need to come with me now." "Why would he send for me?" "Because things have escalated." Marco's eyes met mine directly. "And because he trusts you more than you realize." Fear and curiosity warred within me. Going with Marco meant stepping fully into Dante's world, the world I'd been trying to ignore. Staying meant remaining in ignorance, safe but blind. "Take me to him," I decided. We exited through a service entrance, avoiding the building's main lobby with its cameras and security staff. A car waited, engine running. Marco held the door for me, then slid in beside me. The driver, a man I'd never seen before, pulled away immediately. "Where are we going?" I asked, as the familiar streets of downtown Chicago gave way to industrial areas near the waterfront. "Somewhere secure," Marco answered. "That's all you need to know for now." We drove in silence after that, the darkness outside the windows growing deeper as streetlights became sparser. Finally, we pulled up to what appeared to be an abandoned warehouse. 2 men stepped from the shadows as we approached, hands visibly resting on weapons beneath their jackets. Marco exchanged quiet words with them before escorting me inside. The exterior's decrepit appearance was deceptive. Inside, the space had been converted into what looked like an operational center. Maps covered one wall, surveillance monitors another. Men and women moved with purpose between workstations, a sense of controlled urgency permeating the air. And in the center of it all, standing over a table covered with documents, was Dante. He looked up as we entered, his face showing first surprise, then anger, as his eyes locked with Marco's. "I told you to keep her away from this," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "She was already looking," Marco replied evenly. "Better she hears the truth from you than pieces it together herself." Dante's jaw tightened, but he gave a curt nod. "Leave us." Marco and the others filed out, leaving us alone in the cavernous space. Dante looked different, harder, more dangerous than I'd ever seen him. His customary suit was replaced by dark jeans and a black shirt, and the shadows under his eyes spoke of sleepless nights. "You shouldn't be here," he said, echoing Marco's earlier words. "Neither should you," I countered. "What's happening, Dante?" He ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of uncertainty. "A war is brewing. One I've been trying to prevent." "A war? Between who?" "Rival organizations. Territories being contested." He moved closer. "I've maintained peace in this city for years by establishing clear boundaries, clear rules. Someone's trying to upset that balance." "By doing what?" His eyes hardened. "By targeting me. And by extension, everyone connected to me." The implication hit me like a physical blow. "Including me." "Yes." His voice softened slightly. "That's why I wanted you kept away, safe. But Marco brought me here. Marco thinks I need you." A muscle worked in his jaw. "He's not wrong." I took a step closer. "Then tell me everything. No more half-truths." For a moment, I thought he would refuse. Then he gestured to a side room. "Not here." The room was small, furnished only with a desk and chairs. Dante closed the door behind us, then faced me, his expression grave. My father built our organization on certain principles, he began. Territory, respect, family. When he died, I inherited not just his business, but his enemies. I've spent years building alliances, neutralizing threats, establishing a balance that keeps bloodshed to a minimum. And now? Now someone wants to destroy that balance. A rival from New York has formed an alliance with a faction here in Chicago. People who were once loyal to my father, but see me as too modern, too soft. His lips twisted in a humorless smile. They've made their first move. 2 of my lieutenants were killed 3 nights ago. A shipment was hijacked. The night you left, I said, connecting the pieces. He nodded. It's a direct challenge, one I can't ignore. So what happens now? I asked, dreading the answer. Now I respond, decisively. The coldness in his voice sent a chill through me. This was the side of Dante I'd glimpsed but never fully acknowledged, the leader capable of violence, of retribution. And then what? More killing? More retaliation? I shook my head. There has to be another way. He stepped closer, his eyes intense. This is my world, Eliza. This is who I am. It's not all you are, I insisted. I've seen the other sides of you. But can you accept this side? He took my hands in his, because I can't change it. Not completely. Not yet. The qualifier, that not yet, hung in the air between us. What does that mean? I asked. It means I've been working toward something. Future. Moving our interests into legal channels over time. His grip tightened. But transitions like that take years, and enemies see them as weakness. I searched his face, looking for deception but finding only intensity, determination, and something that looked almost like hope. Why are you telling me this now? Because you deserve to know who you're involved with. His voice dropped lower, and because I need you to understand the danger you're in, just by being connected to me. Fear tightened my chest, but not for the reasons he might have expected. Not fear of him, but for him. For us. For whatever this thing between us was becoming. I found your notebook, I admitted. Tonight, before Marco came. I know about the officials on your payroll, about the shipments. His expression didn't change. And I'm still here. Something shifted in his eyes, relief, perhaps, or wonder. He pulled me closer, one hand coming up to cradle my face. Do you have any idea how extraordinary you are? Before I could respond, the door burst open. Marco stood there, tension radiating from him. They've found us, he said simply. Dante's transformation was immediate. Gone was the man who had held me with such tenderness. In his place stood someone harder, colder. A commander preparing for battle. Secure the perimeter, he ordered, already moving toward the door. Get the cars ready for evacuation. Dante, I caught his arm. What's happening? They're here. His voice was tight. The men who want to destroy everything I've built. How did they find this place? A shadow crossed his face. We have a traitor in our ranks. The word hung in the air, poisonous with implication. Trust was everything in Dante's world. Betrayal, unforgivable. What do we do? He paused at my use of we, something flickering in his eyes. Then he pressed a small handgun into my palm. You stay close to me. If anything happens, you use this. The weapon felt alien in my hand, heavy with potential violence. I've never... Point and pull the trigger, he said grimly. Aim for center mass. Don't hesitate. He was moving again before I could protest further, pulling me along beside him as he returned to the main room. The atmosphere had changed completely. Lights dimmed, positions taken up near windows and doors, weapons drawn. Status, Dante demanded. 3 vehicles approaching from the east, someone reported. Estimate 8 to 10 men. Identities. Castellano's crew, based on vehicle descriptions. A muscle ticked in Dante's jaw. Evacuation route? West entrance is clear. Cars waiting. Dante nodded. Hold positions. If they breach, cover our exit. He turned to me, his expression grave. Stay between Marco and me. Do exactly as I say. If I tell you to run, you run. Understand? I nodded, too numb with fear to speak. The next moments passed in a blur of tension and hushed orders. Outside, vehicles approached, engines cutting off as they neared the warehouse. Men positioned themselves in defensive formations, weapons ready. Dante stood tall amidst them, radiating a deadly calm that was somehow more frightening than panic would have been. Then the shooting started. The first explosion of gunfire made me flinch. Dante pushed me down behind a metal desk, his body partially shielding mine as bullets tore through windows and pinged off metal surfaces. The sound was deafening, disorienting. "We need to move," Marco shouted above the noise. "They're trying to surround us." Dante gave a sharp nod. "Back exit. Now." With his hand gripping mine, we moved in a crouched run toward the rear of the warehouse, Marco covering our path. Other men provided suppressing fire, buying us time. The air was thick with gunsmoke and plaster dust from bullets hitting walls. We had almost reached the exit when a figure stepped from the shadows ahead. I recognized him vaguely. One of the newer security men from Dante's building. He raised his weapon, pointing it directly at Dante's chest. "Castellano sends his regards," he said. Time seemed to slow. I saw Dante's hand moving toward his own weapon, saw the traitor's finger tightening on the trigger. Without thinking, I raised the gun Dante had given me and fired. The recoil shocked me, the sound explosive in the enclosed space. The man's expression registered surprise as he staggered backward, his shot going wide. Dante finished what I'd started, firing twice more with deadly precision. Then we were moving again, burst through a back door into the cold night air. Cars waited, engines running. Dante practically threw me into the nearest one, following close behind. Marco took the wheel, and we accelerated away from the warehouse as more gunfire erupted behind us. "Are you hurt?" Dante demanded, his hands moving over me, checking for injuries. I shook my head, unable to speak. My hands trembled violently, the gun still clutched in my grip. Gently, Dante pried my fingers from the weapon and tucked it away. "You saved my life," he said quietly. I looked down at my hands, expecting to see blood. There was none, but I could still feel the trigger beneath my finger, the horrifying moment when I'd chosen Dante's life over another's. "I killed him," I whispered. "No." Dante's voice was firm. "I did. Your shot wounded him, but it didn't matter. I'd fired with intent, had crossed a line I could never uncross." Dante pulled me against his chest, his arms encircling me protectively as I began to shake with delayed shock. "I'm sorry," he murmured into my hair. "I'm so sorry you had to be part of this." "Where are we going?" I managed to ask, my voice muffled against his shirt. "Somewhere safe," he promised. "Somewhere they can't find us." I nodded, too numb to question further. The city lights blurred outside the windows as we sped through the night, leaving behind the warehouse and the violence, but not its consequences. In the space of a few hours, everything had changed. I'd seen the full reality of Dante's world, had participated in its brutal logic, had chosen a side. There was no going back now, not for either of us. As the city gave way to darkness beyond, I closed my eyes and felt Dante's heartbeat against my cheek, strong, steady, alive because of what I'd done. Whatever came next, whatever price we'd pay for this night, we would face it together. For better or worse, our fates were now inextricably linked. We drove through the night, the city lights fading behind us as we headed north along the lake. No one spoke. Marco focused on the road, occasionally checking the mirrors for signs of pursuit. Dante held me against him, one hand stroking my hair, the other still gripping his phone as he sent messages I couldn't see. My mind kept replaying the warehouse scene, the sound of gunfire, the traitor's face, the weight of the gun in my hand. I'd crossed a threshold I never imagined I would. From observer to participant in Dante's dangerous world, after nearly 2 hours, we turned onto a private drive bordered by dense trees. Security gates opened automatically as we approached, closing behind us once we'd passed through. Ahead, nestled against the shoreline, stood a modern glass and stone house, its silhouette dark against the starlit sky. "Where are we?" I asked, my voice hoarse from disuse. "One of my properties," Dante replied. "Off the books. Few people know about it." Marco pulled up to the front entrance and cut the engine. "I'll secure the perimeter," he said, exiting the car. Dante helped me out, his hand steady at the small of my back as he led me inside. The house was spacious but warm, with wood and stone elements softening the modern architecture. Floor-to-ceiling windows faced the lake, though in the darkness, I could see nothing but our reflections against black glass. "You should rest," Dante said, guiding me toward a hallway. "We're safe here for now." "I don't think I can sleep," I admitted. He studied my face. "A shower, then. It will help." He showed me to a master bathroom with a large walk-in shower. Clean towels and toiletries were arranged as if expecting guests, or providing for a quick escape. I wondered how many times Dante had needed such refuges. "There are clothes in the closet," he said. "Help yourself to whatever fits." When he turned to leave, I caught his wrist. "Don't go." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, or relief. "I'll be right outside." The hot water helped more than I expected, washing away the physical remnants of the night. The smell of gunpowder, the grit of plaster dust, the cold sweat of fear, but it couldn't wash away the memory or the knowledge of what I'd become part of. I found a soft sweater and leggings in the closet, both new with tags still attached, both mysteriously in my size. Another reminder of Dante's meticulous planning, his attention to details most people would overlook. When I emerged, Dante was waiting in the adjacent bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed with his head in his hands. He looked up as I entered, and the rawness in his expression took me aback. For the first time since I'd known him, he wasn't carefully controlling what he allowed others to see. "I never wanted this for you," he said. "Any of it." I moved to stand before him, but it happened, and we can't undo it. "No." He reached for my hands. "We can't." I let him pull me closer until I stood between his knees, his forehead resting against my stomach. I threaded my fingers through his hair, offering what comfort I could. "What happens now?" I asked. He lifted his head to meet my gaze. "Now we survive. We regroup. We end this war before it truly begins." "How?" "By finding the source of the betrayal. By cutting it out like the cancer it is." The coldness in his voice sent a shiver through me. This was the Dante Ricci the world feared. The man who had built and maintained an empire through whatever means necessary. "And then?" I pressed. His expression softened slightly. "And then we rebuild, differently, if possible." "If possible," I echoed, searching his face. "Is it? Really?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I've been working toward it, moving investments into legitimate channels, establishing legal businesses that can eventually replace the other operations. But it's complicated. There are people who depend on me, families who've been loyal for generations, arrangements that can't be undone overnight." He sighed. "And there are those who would see any change as weakness, who would exploit it, like they're trying to do now." I sat beside him on the bed, suddenly exhausted. "I don't know if I can live like this, Dante." Looking over my shoulder, surrounded by violence. He tensed. "You want to leave?" "No," I said honestly. "I want things to be different." His arm slid around me, pulling me against his side. "So do I. More than you know." We sat in silence for a time, the weight of everything that had happened, everything still to come, settling around us. Outside, I could hear waves lapping at the shore, a peaceful counterpoint to the turmoil within. "When my father was dying," Dante said eventually, "he made me promise to protect our family, not just our blood relatives, but everyone under our care. He believed power came with responsibility." His voice grew softer, but he also warned me that our way of life wouldn't last forever, that I would need to find a new path eventually. "And have you been looking for that path?" He nodded. "For years. Quietly, carefully. But tonight shows how dangerous that search can be." I turned to face him, taking his hands in mine. "Then don't do it alone anymore." His eyes searched mine. "You can't possibly want this life." "I want you," I said simply. "The rest we'll figure out together." The admission hung between us, raw and honest. Dante's hand came up to cup my face, his thumb brushing across my cheekbone with infinite tenderness. "I've never deserved you," he whispered. "From that first moment in the rain, I knew you were too good for my world. But I couldn't stay away. I don't want you to stay away." I leaned into his touch. I want you to trust me, to let me help. He studied me for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Then he stood, pulling me up with him. Come with me, he said, leading me through the house to what appeared to be a study. Inside, he unlocked a hidden panel in the wall to reveal a safe. From it, he removed a laptop and several thick folders, which he laid out on the desk. This is everything, he said. My plan for transitioning our operations, financial records, property holdings, legitimate business investments. He met my gaze steadily. No one else has seen all of this? Not even Marco? The trust implicit in the gesture wasn't lost on me. Why show me now? Because you're right. I can't do this alone. He opened the laptop. And because if something happens to me, someone needs to know the full picture. Nothing's going to happen to you, I said fiercely. A sad smile touched his lips. In my world, Eliza, that's not a promise anyone can make. We spent the next several hours going through the documents. I learned more about Dante's operations in those hours than I had in all my weeks working for him. The complexity was staggering, a network of businesses, investments, and property holdings that spanned far beyond Chicago, some legitimate, others serving as fronts for less legal activities. But what surprised me most was the thoroughness of his transition plan. For years, he'd been systematically moving assets into above-board enterprises, creating legal employment for his people, establishing charitable foundations that could eventually replace the community support his organization provided in poorer neighborhoods. This could work, I said, looking up from a spreadsheet detailing projected timelines. It's ambitious, but solid. It will take years, he warned, and there will be resistance, both from rivals and from within. But it's possible, yes. His eyes met mine. With the right support, the implication was clear. He was offering me a place in this new future, not just as his assistant or his lover, but as a partner in transformation. I studied architecture before my mother got sick, I said, thinking out loud, and business administration after. I could help with the legitimate development projects, the urban renewal initiatives. Dante's expression brightened. You'd be perfect for it. For the first time since the warehouse, I felt something like hope stirring. Maybe there was a way forward that didn't involve perpetual violence and fear. Maybe we could build something different together. Dawn was breaking over the lake by the time we finished, pale light filtering through the windows. We'd moved to the couch at some point, papers spread around us. I leaned against Dante's shoulder, exhaustion finally overtaking me. You should sleep, he murmured, pressing a kiss to my temple. I nodded, too tired to argue. He helped me back to the bedroom, drawing the blinds against the morning light. As I slid beneath the covers, he moved to leave. Stay, I said, reaching for his hand. Please. He hesitated only briefly before removing his shoes and jacket and lying down beside me. I curled against him, my head on his chest, his heartbeat steady beneath my ear. What happens tomorrow? I asked, fighting to keep my eyes open. His arms tightened around me. We face whatever comes, together. I nodded, sleep already claiming me. The last thing I felt was his lips against my forehead, gentle as a promise. I woke hours later to an empty bed and the sound of voices from elsewhere in the house. Dante's side of the mattress was cold. He'd been gone a while. I pulled on a robe I found in the closet and followed the sounds to the kitchen. Dante stood with Marco and two other men I recognized from his security team, bent over papers spread across the kitchen island. They fell silent as I entered, all eyes turning to me. Any news? I asked, crossing to stand beside Dante. He placed a protective arm around my waist. We've identified several of Castellano's men from the warehouse. 2 were killed in the firefight. The rest escaped. What about our people? Something flashed in Dante's eyes at my use of our. Approval, perhaps, or gratitude. 1 wounded, being treated by our doctor. The rest scattered to safe houses as planned. And the traitor? Dead, Marco confirmed, his expression grim. But we don't know if he was working alone or if there are others. There are always others, one of the other men said darkly. Dante's jaw tightened, which is why we need to move quickly. The longer this drags on, the more vulnerable we become. What's the plan? I asked. The men exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with my presence in this conversation, but Dante's arm remained firmly around me, his stance making it clear I belonged there. "We've arranged a meeting," he said. "Neutral ground. Representatives from the major families to discuss a resolution." "A trap," the third man muttered. "A calculated risk," Dante corrected. "One we've prepared for." "When?" I asked. "Tonight, 8 o'clock. My heart stuttered. "So soon?" "We can't afford to wait." Dante's expression was resolute. "The longer we appear weakened, the more others will try to move against us." I understood the logic, but fear still coiled in my stomach. "What can I do to help?" Again, that exchange of glances between the men. This time, Marco spoke. "With respect, Miss Conti, this isn't—" "Eliza stays," Dante interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. "She's proven herself, more than some who've been with us for years." His gaze swept over the men, a clear reminder of the betrayal they'd experienced. No one argued further. Instead, they turned to the plans before them, diagrams of a restaurant, security positions, exit routes. I listened carefully, offering occasional suggestions about timing and logistics that seemed to surprise them with their practicality. As the meeting concluded, and the men moved to make preparations, Dante pulled me aside. "You don't have to be part of this," he said quietly. "You can stay here, where it's safe." "No," I met his gaze steadily. "If you're going, I'm going." "Eliza, I'm not hiding while you risk your life, Dante. Not anymore." I placed my hand against his cheek. "You said we'd face things together. Did you mean it?" His expression softened. "Yes, I meant it." "Then trust me to stand with you, not just in the planning, but in the execution." For a long moment he studied my face. Then he nodded. "Decision made." "You'll stay close to me," he said. "Marco will be your shadow if we're separated. You'll wear a vest under your clothes, and you'll follow every instruction without question. Understood?" I nodded. Understood. He pulled me into his arms, holding me tightly. "I never thought I'd find someone who would stand with me like this," he murmured against my hair. "Neither did I admitted. "But here we are." The rest of the day passed in careful preparation. I was fitted with a lightweight body armor vest, given instructions on emergency protocols, and briefed on who would be attending the meeting. Dante was never far from my side, his hand often finding mine, his eyes seeking reassurance that I hadn't changed my mind. As evening approached, I changed into clothes that had been brought for me. An elegant black dress that could accommodate the vest underneath, with a matching coat that concealed more than it revealed. Dante wore one of his impeccable suits, the picture of power and control. Only I could see the tension in his shoulders, the hypervigilance in his gaze. "Ready?" he asked as the cars were brought around. I took his hand, lacing my fingers through his. "Ready." The drive to the restaurant was tense, our convoy moving through Chicago's streets with practiced precision. Security teams had already secured the venue, an upscale Italian restaurant owned by a neutral third party, closed to the public for the evening. As we pulled up, Dante turned to me. "Remember what I told you. Stay close. Follow instructions. If anything happens—" "I know," I assured him, squeezing his hand. "I remember everything." The restaurant was dimly lit, private dining rooms arranged around a central space where tables had been configured for the meeting. Men I recognized from photographs were already seated, their security positioned discreetly around the perimeter. Dante entered with confident strides, his hand at the small of my back. Conversations hushed as heads turned toward us. I felt the weight of evaluating stares, the silent questions about my presence. At the head of the table sat an older man with steel-gray hair and cold eyes. Anthony Castellano, the New York boss who had allied with Dante's enemies. Beside him was a familiar face that made my blood run cold. Vincent Moretti, one of the regular visitors to Dante's penthouse, always treated with respect, but never with warmth. "Ricci," Castellano acknowledged. "Bold of you to show up after what happened." "Even bolder to bring your woman," Moretti added, his eyes lingering on me with inappropriate interest. Dante's expression remained impassive. "Miss Conti is here as my advisor. She stays." Castellano shrugged, a gesture of false indifference. Your funeral. Dante pulled out my chair before taking his own. Let's not waste time. We all know why we're here. The next hour was a masterclass in negotiation, threat, and counter-threats. Dante laid out evidence of Castellano's incursion into his territory, of Moretti's betrayal, of the coordinated effort to undermine his authority. They responded with accusations of their own, that Dante was softening operations, that his transition plans threatened traditional power structures, that his father would be ashamed of his modernizing efforts. Through it all, I watched and listened, noting who spoke, who remained silent, whose eyes revealed more than their words. Occasionally, Dante would turn to me for a whispered consultation, a gesture that clearly irritated the traditionalists at the table. The old ways are dying, Dante said finally, his voice carrying authority throughout the room. We can evolve, or we can tear each other apart fighting over scraps of a diminishing empire. Pretty words, Castellano sneered. But words don't hold territory. No, Dante agreed. Actions do. He nodded to Marco, who placed a flash drive on the table. On this drive is evidence of financial fraud within your organization, Anthony. The kind that interests federal prosecutors. I have 3 copies in secure locations, with instructions for their release if anything happens to me or mine. The atmosphere in the room shifted palpably. Castellano's face flushed with anger, while Moretti paled. You wouldn't, Moretti said. It would damage all of us. I would, Dante countered. Because unlike you, I've prepared for a different future. One that doesn't depend on the old structures. Castellano's eyes narrowed. Your father. My father understood adaptation, Dante interrupted. He prepared me for this moment, for this choice. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. I felt rather than saw the subtle shifts in position as security personnel on both sides prepared for potential violence. Then Castellano laughed, a harsh, unexpected sound. You've got balls, Ricci. I'll give you that. He leaned forward. What are your terms? Relief coursed through me as negotiations began in earnest. Territories were redrawn, compensations agreed upon for recent losses, and timelines established for gradual transitions of power. Throughout the delicate process, Dante remained firm but fair, never yielding on essential points, but offering concessions on others. By the time signatures were placed on documents nearly 2 hours later, a fragile peace had been established. Not perfect, not permanent, but a foundation to build upon. As we prepared to leave, Castellano approached me directly for the first time. You're either the bravest woman I've ever met, he said, studying me with curious eyes, or the most foolish. Perhaps both, I replied evenly. A smile creased his weathered face. He's different with you, stronger, yet softer somehow. He glanced at Dante, who was speaking with Marco nearby. Maybe there's something to this new way after all. We left the restaurant under the watchful eyes of both allies and former enemies, the night air cool against my flushed skin. In the car, Dante finally allowed his rigid control to relax slightly, his shoulders dropping as he exhaled deeply. It's done, he said, taking my hand. For now, I amended. He nodded, acknowledging the truth of it. For now, but it's a beginning. We returned to the lake house rather than the city, both needing space and time away from the pressure. As security teams established perimeters outside, Dante and I stood on the deck overlooking the water, the moon casting a silver path across the gentle waves. What you did tonight, he said, turning to face me. Standing with me, advising me, showing no fear even when surrounded by the most dangerous men in the region. He shook his head in wonder. I've never seen anything like it. I was terrified, I admitted. But not of them. I was afraid of losing you, of losing this chance to build something different. He pulled me into his arms. We won't lose it. I promise you. For the first time, I truly believed him, not because the danger had passed. It hadn't, not entirely, but because we'd faced it together and emerged stronger. I love you, I said, the words slipping out naturally, inevitably. I think I have since that night in the rain. His eyes softened, vulnerable in a way I'd rarely seen. I loved you from the moment you looked at me without fear, when you saw me, really saw me, as a man, not a monster. His lips found mine in a kiss that felt like both a culmination and a beginning. When we finally parted, he rested his forehead against mine. "Marry me," he whispered. The request, simple, direct, heartfelt, took my breath away. "Are you sure?" With everything still unsettled, I've never been more certain of anything. His hands frame my face. "Whatever comes next, whatever challenges we face, I want to face them with you beside me. Not as my assistant or my advisor, but as my wife, my partner in everything." I searched his eyes and found only truth there. The same man who had given me his card in the rain, who had shown me his world with all its darkness and light, who had trusted me with his plans for a different future. "Yes," I said. "Yes, I'll marry you." His smile was radiant, transforming his entire face. He lifted me off my feet, spinning us in a circle as laughter, genuine, unburdened laughter, escaped us both. Later that night, as we lay together watching moonlight filter through the windows, I traced the lines of his face with gentle fingers. "Do you think we can really do it?" I asked. "Change everything?" "Not everything," he said thoughtfully. "And not overnight. But yes, I believe we can transform the core of it. Build something that honors the past, but looks to the future." His hand covered mine. "Something our children could inherit without shame." The mention of children, of a family, a legacy rewritten, filled me with unexpected warmth. From that chance encounter in the rain to this moment of quiet planning, our lives had become irrevocably intertwined. The path ahead wouldn't be easy or straight, but we would walk it together, from darkness to light, I murmured, remembering something he'd said during the negotiations. "With you beside me," he agreed, pulling me closer, "I believe anything is possible." And as I drifted toward sleep in his arms, I knew that whatever tomorrow brought, whatever challenges we would face in the weeks, months, and years to come, we had found in each other a shelter from life's storms, not a golden cage or a prison, but a home built on trust, respect, and love. A home we would defend together,